Now let's pivot to our first live case study. In many ways, this is a typical acquisition rehab, tax credit resyndication deal inside Century Housing's deep retrofit. One of our main goals with today's case study panels is to show real-world examples of the different programs that are available from the state and locally from our utilities to incentivize and support your efficiency upgrades and get into the realities of project development on the ground. In many ways, this project, Florence Morehouse, is a classic resyndication project. So I think a lot of what we'll talk about now will resonate with a lot of you. At a high level, Florence Avenue Villas realized 29% energy savings, 25% cost savings, a very comprehensive project, as you can see in the summary slide. I'd like to introduce Oscar Alvarado with Century Housing, providing our owner perspective. John Perfit from the LABBC team is also a real estate development practitioner, heads up an organization called Renew Neighborhoods LA, and John Neal with the Association for Energy Affordability. They're a third-party program implementer for utilities around the country. Locally here, they implement the low-income weatherization program and also the whole building multifamily efficiency program. So with that, Oscar, let's start with the origin story. Can you tell us about how this project came to you?
Sure. First of all, I'll say that Century is a community development finance institution. So we both make loans to affordable housing developers in addition to operating our own housing. Morehouse was an asset that we purchased back from a previous borrower and we held for a few years. And Florence came to us as its prior owner, who was also a borrower, was falling into default on its public agency loans. We ended up taking over the Florence building by just assuming the debt that it had and the regulatory obligations on the property. And it was in serious disrepair. Once we decided to take it over, we felt like we could refinance Florence and Morehouse together into a single tax credit project and perform significant renovations.
And Oscar, a little bit more just about Century. You're focused mainly on acquisitions. You are a lender yourself, working with investors and so forth. And you don't have an in-house construction manager on staff. Is that right?
That's right.
Right. So I could imagine that layering in efficiency upgrades could seem a little bit daunting, especially when we start looking at the different program requirements and everything. How did you get over that hurdle?
Well, it takes a lot of help for us to be able to get over hurdles like that, as you mentioned. So we really were able to make these improvements happen with the help of John Perfit and RNLA. And he was the person who introduced us to John Neal as well. And so what really helped us is having AEA take such a prominent role in assisting us with finding the opportunities within our projects and then helping us to specify and understand various equipment options, and then beyond that, helping us navigate the administration of the incentive programs that were available to us. Without that help, it becomes a fairly significant challenge to successfully layer these types of programs into our projects.
Absolutely. So, John Neal, can you talk a little bit about the role that AEA plays vis-a-vis LIWIP?
Yeah. So the low-income weatherization program is captures all those goals that Oscar mentioned. We really want to sort of help guide owners through the process of not only leveraging the incentive money that's available through that program, but also identify other sources of funding, both from sort of like a big picture perspective, here's a program over here, here's a program over there, but also down to the level where we can say, we've been to your building, we know that this measure is applicable, this measure is recommended, here's how you can layer it with your project, and be there start to finish on the project to sort of help make sure it gets done.
Right, start to finish. John Perfit, kind of going back to the origin of this project, knowing that it was a resyndication deal, how did you think about which program to connect Oscar with for the scope of the project that they were anticipating?
Well, given that it was a significant rehab and involved temporary relocation of the tenants, you look towards a kind of more comprehensive program where you can take a look at the big drivers as far as energy efficiency. So LIWIP, especially in the Los Angeles market, presents that kind of more inclusive program, or more comprehensive program, I should say. So it seemed like a natural. And I've been, as we've talked about at the BBC, it's just a great window that you have when these projects go through resyndication, because technology has changed, the buildings have aged, you get more affordability, you can do these deeper energy efficiency retrofits. And as Oscar mentioned, even a resyndication or refinancing is complicated, many layers of financing. And the great thing about the LIWIP program is that you can rely on trusted partners like BBC, like AEA, to help to leverage some of the work you're already doing as a function of getting these tax credits or getting refinanced with public agencies and so forth. So you don't have to invent the wheel and reinvent the wheel, I should say, but you can also just leverage a lot of the work you're doing. And that creates a win-win scenario where you can be incentivized, the project is incentivized to go deeper on these energy efficiency retrofits. And that creates good things for the tenants. It's a real win-win-win all around for tenants, ownership, and for greenhouse gas reduction.
Absolutely. So John Neal, I wanted to ask a little more about how you worked with the project team to evaluate opportunities, to uncover and evaluate opportunities to go deeper.
Yeah. It sort of depends on how soon we're able to get involved in the project. So typically what we do is if we can sort of get in there early, like we did on this project, we'll immediately coordinate to find out sort of what was the project already planning to do, either through a physical needs assessment or maybe an initial walkthrough from the owner or selected architect. And at that point, really our process is sort of find the measures that would be desired sort of out the gate, like what would they already be planning to do that already met sort of what we consider to be like good efficiency targets, and then what areas are there to go further that maybe the team wasn't considering. And at that point, we try to start taking all the available funds that we know exist to justify to the team to say go a little bit further. So can we leverage the available funding to buy a better HVAC system, or put in a renewable energy system, for example.
So this project scope is fairly, tried and true in terms of the measures, aside from the fact that you assisted the team or helped the team really to go for premium efficiency wherever the economics made sense. But I wanted to focus on one of the somewhat unique features of the project, which is the solar thermal. John Neal, where did that idea come from, and how did you evaluate the technical feasibility? And then John or Oscar, any comments on the economics, how you looked at that and made that work?
Yeah, so solar thermal is sort of one of the tools in the toolkit that we look at on projects, and the sort of net effect is that solar thermal is pretty much cost covered to be included. So from that perspective, it was, if cash strapped project, a good measure to include versus say solar PV, which is another renewable option that we typically look at, that at the time didn't have the same sort of sources of funding to help offset its first cost.
Oscar, I know that there are some rules and sort of industry practices around managing funds from all these various sources and how those are classified. How did you kind of lay the groundwork to make sure that you, in fact, could take advantage of all the different sources of funds that John was just talking about?
Well, it's worth reiterating what John said, that it's important that we started early with working with AEA. When we start working on a renovation projects, there are certain aspects of the renovation that are fairly evident in terms of the physical need of the property, right? Like, does it need new windows? Does it need a new roof? And so on. What isn't obvious is the types of measures that we could layer on by using some of these incentive programs. And so that's where it's really important that we work early with a group like AEA and get our scope down so that it can be incorporated into our scope of work. For us, we have to think early about some of these kinds of programs, especially when the money is going to come in the form of a grant. Just one nuance with affordable housing is that we're not allowed to take grants as capital into our projects when they're funded with low-income housing tax credits, which most affordable housing projects are. So we usually need a plan to take the grant, have that money come into our parent company, and then have that parent company turn around and lend the money to the project as a 0% interest loan. It's just a tax nuance, and it's just something that adds administrative and legal legwork to us, but it's one of those things that we've got to be aware of early on and make sure that it gets incorporated into the project's overall financing structure.
Awesome.
Dave, I'll just add on the solar thermal system that, given the kind of like the climate zone that we're in Southern California, the incentive structure and the greenhouse gas sort of bang for your buck that you get, it's a really logical and good measure for a lot of these smallish to medium size or even larger size multifamily buildings.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Shifting back to technology and scoping, this is a very comprehensive project. And so back to John Neal, you touched on this earlier, but there's this balance between advocating for going deeper, more efficiency, and keeping on project schedule and on budget, and knowing when to let go. How do you, if you remember on this project, how did you think about that, or how do you do that generally?
Yeah, it comes down to us as a program implementer to both use the tools and requirements that we've sort of set up for the program to naturally encourage projects to go further. So I think where we really add value and where we sort of pick and choose what to fight for comes down to the things we've seen during our site walk at the building in advance, where we say, like on Florence, one of the deficiencies in the existing building was the HVAC duct system that had a lot of defects and a lot of holes. It's hard to reach and access to repair, but we thought that was a really important component to repair as part of this project, whether or not it really brought a lot of credit back to the project. It was important to do for residents' health, air quality, et cetera. So there's only so much that, the design team and project team can absorb. Energy is great to focus on, but there's a lot of other competing interests. And so we have to sort of balance needs there.
Right. Absolutely. You touched on health, and that's obviously top of mind for everyone these days. And speaking about residents, Oscar, I wanted to ask, how did the residents react to this project initially, and how did you sell them on the benefits?
Yeah, well, one of the things with a project like this is that because of the extent of the work that we're doing, it does involve resident relocation, temporary relocation. We end up having to move folks out of their apartments for about 30 days or so while we make the improvements that happen in their units, and then we bring them back. So that tends to be kind of one of the bigger sticking points on a project like this, as you could imagine. They always take a similar trajectory. In the beginning, residents are skeptical and they have doubt about the extent of improvement and changes that you've told them you're going to make to the building. And so they're very apprehensive. And then it sort of moves on to a second phase where they express frustration about being asked to move from their home, and then the noise and the dust caused by construction. And then it sort of all ends in residents expressing gratitude and kind of disbelief at the vast changes that you've brought to their home and to their community, and the fact that the rents haven't gone up and nothing's changed except that for them, except that now the utility bills are a little bit less than they used to be, sometimes significantly less, and their home looks great. So it all follows that sort of a pattern. But at the end of the day, I think the benefits that the residents see, really more than make up for the inconvenience, and that was certainly the case with this project.
Yeah. I wanted to wrap up by just directing the same question to all three of you. Maybe I'll pick on John Neal some more. What's the main thing you took away, what you learned from this project that you think others should know?
I would say that I use this project as sort of a gold star when talking to other projects about the success of getting in early. A lot of times what we are up against as a developer that calls the program and says, okay, I'm installing equipment tomorrow, even, on my tax credit project, can we work on getting some incentives for this? And, always our response is like, it's too late at that point. Like, we have to show under our programs that we helped you sort of deliver more, that the dollars basically helped you go further than what you were able to do anyways. And so the Florence Morehouse projects are great examples where they looped us in early. We were able to talk early. And I think that produced a much better result than if we had sort of come in later in the game.
John Perfit, what's something you took away from this project?
I think there's actually two things that come to mind for me is while on these resyndications and these medium-sized to larger affordable housing projects, there's a lot of moving pieces. Using a program like LIWIP and the technical assistance that comes by practitioners to be able to make that less complicated and somewhat treat that, given what Oscar said about the treatment of the grant funds and so forth, someone externally as a source allows it to be less complicated and be less of a complicating factor.
Oscar, what's the one thing that you took away from this project that you'd like others to know?
Well, I think I would have to go back to this idea that nothing helps to sell our work better than success story, and there's nothing as powerful as that in our work. So I'm hopeful that our biggest takeaway here is the fact that we are able to now replicate this process on future projects, given what we've learned.
Absolutely. So start early, be creative, bring dollars forward in time, and use the successes to bring more success. I think that's a great place to end. Thank you all for the time today.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.